Welcome back. We're looking forward, Be'ezus Hashem, to continue in this Igeres HaKodesh, the 13th epistle of the Alter Rebbe, maybe even conclude the chapter, this Igeres. So Igeres HaKodesh, we do periodically mention, of course, namely for the newcomers, this is the fourth segment in the Sefer Tanya Kadisha, which is the magnum opus, indeed the magnum opus of the Alter Rebbe. There's 5 segments, we did mention as well. Quite a few times there's precision in the fact there's 5 segments to the Sefer. This is the Sefer of Torah, Shebiksav of Torah's Chassidus, thus the 5 sections. This is the 4th. We merited to conclude the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, which is the Likutei Amarim Shayich Adomon Igeres HaTshuva. We're holding again in the 13th Igeres HaKodesh. This segment is definitely distinct in comparison to the first. There, it's all the chapters are sequential. It's one idea basically, even though, for example, the Likutei Amarim, there's 53 chapters. There's different groups. You can definitely group these chapters. Different ideas that Alter Rebbe conveys, but nonetheless, there's definitely a connection between one and the other, for that matter, the more, we did mention, I think even as recent as last week, the more you learn Tanya, you see the clear correlation, the clear connection of the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, and 5th, and all the chapters, all the way till the 53rd. But there's the way it's set up. It's Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Dalet, and so on. Certainly, Shaykh B'Amunah, the Alter Rebbe presenting the whole phenomenon of Achdus Hashem, the whole idea of Achdus Hashem in the unique way of the Alter Rebbe's presentation of this fundamental mitzvah, fundamental idea, Hashem Echad, Lishma Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, and then he gets Tshuva, which is also a fundamental mitzvah, the greatest gifts Hashem gave mankind, or Bechlal, particularly Am Yisrael, the ability to realign ourselves with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And so Tshuva itself is an exciting mitzvah, but nothing like the presentation of the Alter Rebbe, and he's a Igeres HaTshuva. 12 chapters in each, in the latter 2, Shaykh B'Amunah and Igeres HaTshuva. So you can definitely see the connection between all the chapters. Igeres HaKodesh, it's letters. Letters are written to different communities and different times, even though it becomes relevant for posterity. This is the Alter Rebbe writing in Igeres, especially the messages which the Alter Rebbe conveys in all areas of Torah, mitzvahs, Torah, Beidah, Milas Chasadim. But they're not directly connected, even though we do find Alter Rebbe himself cross-references between one Igeres and the other. But again, Igeres is a letter written at a certain, the one Igeres, by definition, is not connected directly to the previous, even though we did mention as well, there is a common thread, you could even say, even though there's certain letters Alter Rebbe does not mention at all the mitzvah of tzedakah, but you can say in the overall, if someone learns Igeres HaKodesh, there's 32 of them, many more of the Alter Rebbe's writings, correspondences, nonetheless, in Sefer Tanya Kadisha, we have 32 of the Alter Rebbe's letters. You learn all the 32, you definitely can glean that the Alter Rebbe is presenting, what is the overwhelming message is definitely the mitzvah of tzedakah, explained in the inimitable way of the Alter Rebbe. But there's certainly Igeres, the Alter Rebbe doesn't even mention tzedakah, as an example. So every Igeres, again, has its, so the overall, it is definitely overwhelmingly underscored, this mitzvah of tzedakah, but there's certain letters that Alter Rebbe doesn't even mention, as we just point out. But one thing is clear: every Igeres is separate. It's a letter written at a certain time, addressing a certain idea, to be mechazik, to strengthen a certain idea. Every idea that Alter Rebbe explains over here in Igeres HaKodesh is coming through the lens of Torah's Chassidus. Before the Alter Rebbe, brings the matter home in the context of making it applicable to the Yid, to the human being, to the one who learns the Igeres HaKodesh, whatever the mitzvah that Alter Rebbe is dealing with. He explains this idea through the unique lens of Torah's Chassidus, which this is the Alter Rebbe, the founder of Teres Chassidus Chabad. And understandably, once you understand the concept, Alter Rebbe is trying to convey, if it's stuck by this lens of Teres Chassidus Chabad, the message becomes so much more poignant in so much more ways, so much more, and has such a qualitative spirit, and of course an impactful spirit, because it's coming through the lens of Teres Chassidus. So again, the Holy Geras HaKodesh is definitely a unique segment. So why do we mention so often? Because there's always those who join, newcomers. I will just say we're going to try to continue right away where we left off, but there is a little more of elaborate presentation in the beginning of Igeres Yud, the 10th, 3 over, 3 back. There is a presentation on this as a little more backdrop of this whole segment. So it's the first class of the 10th Igeres, the 10th epistle, which is really a click away, and generally wherever you're watching it, there is the advantage, as we as well periodically mention, or quite frequently mentioned, there's the TanyaOnline.com, the original website, TanyaOnline, one word, .com, which all the classes, additional to the way it's set up, it's easy to follow with the text. All the previous classes are set up on the left side of the screen, all the way down for that matter, at the very beginning of Kuti Amorim. And it's a click away. For example, this is the 5th class in Igeres HaKodesh, Yud Gimel, this third epistle. Got to know what we're talking about in the first 5 classes. Of course, we're not going to repeat it now. We're going to try not to repeat it now. We're going to make a real big effort not to repeat and be able to move on. Namely, because really it's a click away to understand what Alter Rebbe is saying. But if you're following, you know we're holding on to 238, page 238 in the original text. You can see it in the corresponding English text or on the screen in the scroll bar, which is again advantage. Also, there's advantage to this website. The way it's presented, the text is on a separate scroll bar, as such easy to follow. So the original text is 238. So what is the Alter Rebbe talking about over here in this chapter? Yes, you need to go to previous classes, because it's not fair to elaborate more than we need to on the message of this Pedic, to take time from the present class when it's really a click away to see what the previous class is, what it speaks about. But Alter Rebbe begins this epistle with Morav Tucha Shetzifati L'Riyacho. How great is your goodness, which means not regular goodness, but Rav Tucha, a grand goodness which you hid to those who fear you. Alter Rebbe asked, why is it precisely to those who fear you? What about those who love you? And why is it Safanta? Why is it hiding? Why isn't it stand out overtly to those who serve Hashem or those who love Hashem? So the Rebbe goes into the 2 ways of Yid serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in association with Midah of Chesed, in association with Midah, and then there's the Avodas Hashem in association with Midah Gvura. And you can see even the Midah Gvura, which is more about Tzimtzum, a condensed or more of a calculated type of Avodas Hashem, one way or another, but nonetheless, we're talking about Avodas Hashem, serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu with the Midah of Hashem's Gvura. The sphere of Gvura of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and you can only imagine you're talking about real, authentic Avodas Hashem, and there's certain virtuous expressions to this, the idea of Leimetera B'Seiser, discreet type of Limud HaTorah, Yirah Shamayim, Hatznei Leches. Of course, these are very enormously virtuous characters, especially in Avodas Hashem. It's only solely for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The whole, but nonetheless, it's still there's discipline in this Avodas Hashem, because it's coming from the Gvura of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And of course, someone is in line with Hashem's Gvura, is following the rules and regulations of Torah Mitzvahs to the T. It's not just Tzimtzum in a way that, cutting corners, no Chas v'Shalom, we're talking about an Avodas Hashem, but because of Avodas Hashem, so in the end of the day, there's Tzimtzum, meaning to say that it follows strictly the letter of law. There's again a total discipline to his Avodas Hashem, as opposed to someone who serves HaKadosh Baruch Hu from the perspective, in association with Chesed. It's a different idea. It's not Lashon, it's Ispashtus, just expansiveness in every area of Torah Mitzvahs, maybe Torah Mitzvahs, learning Torah, expansion of learning Torah, time, qualitative learning, quantitative learning, in every mitzvah, how much a person would spend, tzedakah, ad bli dai, like there's no end to how much they extend themselves. Now, who serves the Kodesh Baruch Hu in Gvura, who serves the Kodesh Baruch Hu through via the spirit of Chesed? It depends what the Shadish and Neshama, the source of the Neshama of this Yid is more aligned with Gvura, the other is with Chesed. I say more because in the end of the day, every Yid has the 10 spheres of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In other words, his Neshama is comprised of the 10 spheres because it's a Chelik L'Kamimal. As Alter Rebbe explains in the first segment, the second chapter, Alter Rebbe begins every Yid as a Chelik L'Kamimal Mamash, part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The third chapter, the Alter Rebbe says the Chelik L'Kamimal is not just one like bright projecting light. No, it's divided. This part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this Chelik L'Kamimal, this godly soul which you have is a manifestation, an evolution of the spheres on high, the spheres of the Adam Ha'elyon, this Elikah, this primordial Adam Ha'elyon, if you will. Hashem is beyond Adam, but the Tzir, beyond Tzir means the Kaviyachal, the HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We're talking about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's named, we're talking about 10 spheres, that's Tzilus. As an example, of course, it's not the core of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's higher than Olam HaTzilus, but Tzilus is this which houses the absoluteness of Elokus, and therefore there's the 10 spheres. Nishtal Shalom. Our neshama also has the setup of 10 spheres. So we have all 10 spheres. We have Chesed, we have Gvura. But the question is, what is overwhelming by the direct connection is much more leaning by certain Yidden to Gvura, others to Chesed. As Alter Rebbe brings an evidential proof. Beishamai, Beis Hillel wasn't just they decided I'm going to be strict, and Beis Hillel said, "Oh, let's be lenient." No, they were more. Beishamai was more inclined to the midah of Gvura, even though they also had Chesed, and Alter Rebbe proves it for two reasons. Because in the HaKadosh Baruch Hu's spheres, there's always inclusion in Hashem's spheres. Because you're talking about Achdus Hashem, there's unity, there's union and oneness in Hashem's spheres. So Chesed is not strictly or stubbornly Chesed, if you will. It's always included in Gvura. Therefore, you found actually in practice or in Piskei Dinim of Beis Hillel, some periodically we found that Beis Hillel was stringent while Beis Shammai was lenient. Why? How does that happen? If they're always Beis Shammai is the one who are machmirim, are strict and stringent, and Beis Hillel are mekilin and lenient, why did they interchange from time to time, or a few times, but it's enough once to ask the question? And the answer is because in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's spheres, less tamal lekitzas will repeat, there's always inclusion, and therefore Beis Shammai would paskin leniently, and Beis Hillel would sometimes, at times, paskin strictly, and with stringency. Alter Rebbe brings by Avram Avinu and Yitzchak. Avram Avinu was predominantly Ava. Avram Oyavi, all about Avram. Avram was Chesed, was love. Explained it again in previous classes, but nonetheless, at a certain time, that Avram Avinu needed to extract a stark Yiras Hashem. Of course, Avram Avinu was a Yiras Shamayim by default. He was Avram Avinu. He was God-fearing Yid, but this idea to take a son, which he's going to be the successor. Again, we elaborated in the previous class. He's going to be the successor to Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu waited 100 years. And at this point, the son is 37 years old. And at this point, Avram Avinu is as such 137 years old. And he has to take his son, which he loves. Not only from the human dimension, I love Yitzchak, Asher Ahavta es Yitzchak, but of course, Avram Avinu, which lived a life of Mesiras Nefesh, Lashon of Zeir, Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, they are merkava to Lakus. Everything about them was they were a chariot to the Adam Ha'elyon, which is to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They were completely a whole life of submissiveness on a constant basis to the Ratzon Hashem. Mitech Mesiras Nefesh, through self-sacrifice. That's what Abraham Avinu was. So when he looked at Yitzchak would be Kodesh, Mibeten, and Mileda from conception to birth, and then he would be eventually the successor, which will carry forth the message of monotheism, Achdus Hashem, Hashem's plan in creation, the connection of creation to Creator, which again, Abraham Avinu sacrifices life for that, and Yitzchak would be the one who would continue with that message, and eventually through Yaakov and through the Shvatim, and then for posterity, and Abraham Avinu has to take Yitzchak and bring him to Akedah, and literally that would be the end of that. You can imagine the deep level of Yiras Hashem, which was contrary to whatever Avraham Avinu stood for. Avraham Avinu was about love. So, yeah, default Yiras Shamayim, of course, Avraham Avinu had, but you're talking about such a deep level of Yira and Gvura, such a discipline he had to extract within himself. How does someone who's all about love find that within himself? The answer that even his love, which comes from Chesed, is not just something that he established within his own system. No, this was the Avraham Avinu's Ava was because he was connected to the Chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and by the Midas of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, less tamon kitzutz upirud. There's always inclusion and unity in Hashem's Midas. So Avraham Avinu has it within himself. This Yiras Hashem. The only thing is predominantly Avraham Avinu's Ayabai. But deep down, there's also the idea of Yira, and vice versa. Yitzchak is Pachad, Yitzchak is about Gvura. But Yitzchak also has that idea of Ava. Because again, his Gvura is not just self-made and self-focused, but no, it's stemming from the Gvura of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is, again, because of the inclusion on high, there is also that Ava. And this is what David HaMelech is telling us. Morav Tuvcha, even those Lireyecha, those who serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu through Yira, also have this Tuvcha, this Chesed, similar to Pa'al Tolachesim Boy, we had last week, which is like those who are associated with Midas Ha'ava. They have it as well, not only the Tuvcha, but they have the Rav Tuvcha, exactly the same dosage, if you use that term, because again, the Alter Rebbe is saying it's exactly the same for those who are Pa'al Tolachesim Boch, those who are associated with Ava. Similarly, those who are associated with Yira, they have not only Tuvcha, they have the Rav Tuvcha, the same dosage. Really? Aren't they all about Yira Shamayim? Yeah, that's on the surface. Like Abraham, Yitzchak was namely about Yira Shamayim, Pachad Yitzchak. But Yitzchak also has the same dosage of Abba, even like Avraham Avinu. And so for vice versa. That's why Hashem tells Avraham Avinu, Ata yadati ki yirei elikim ata. Avraham Avinu, yirei elikim? Avraham Avinu was Ayabai. Answer, because the Eibishter tested Avraham Avinu that he was able to extract the Yira Shamayim, which again, his Yira Shamayim was associated with Gvura, the way the Gvura is on high. So even though Avraham is Ayavi, but nonetheless, because there's inclusion of Hashem's Midas, he has equal dosage of Gvura. The only thing is, by that was Sofanta by Avraham Avinu, hidden, because on the surface he served the Kosh Baruch Matech Ava, Chesed, and by Yitzchak was vice versa. So it says, David HaMelech says the same thing, that just like similar to by Yitzchak, he was Pachad Yitzchak, nonetheless he had this Ava, so too, it is the equal dosage. Again, because it's coming from Hashem's Midas. So to every single Yid, even Lireyecha also has that Morav Tuvcha. Not only Tuvcha, but the Rav Tuvcha, the absolute Toiv, the absolute Abba, the absolute Chesed, the absolute Ispashtus and Abedas Hashem. In other words, that's the way, that expression from this Abba and Chesed, that same Ispashtus and Abedas Hashem, Adli Dai. The only thing is, this Yid serves the Kosh Baruch Hu predominantly with Yiras Hashem. So the Morav Tuvcha is Sofanto, it's hidden, Lireyecha. The Rebbe points out, this is where we're holding, by the brackets, the Umash Kosu Bireyecha, which is about 7 lines from the bottom. Umash Kosu, Lireyecha, to those who fear you, not Bireyecha, which grammatically, if you want to say they have the same dosage, Bireyecha, to those who fear you. What's Lireyecha? The difference between the two is, Bireyecha means it's just right there. And if you look at the one who serves HaKadosh Baruch Hu Matech Yira, not so really right there. On this, they overwhelmingly serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu overwhelmingly with the midah of Yira. So you can't say that Avtuvcha is Bireyecha. It's like right there. It's not right there. It's Lireyecha. Lireyecha means it's like stands as a reservoir that they could periodically tap into when it's the right time. When it's the demanded time, but this Yid, Eved Hashem, to arouse that midah of Chesed, it's standing there that I could just tap into it, go to the treasure of Ava and extract as much as dosage as or even maybe the entire Rav Tuvcha. How much Ava can I pull? How much Chesed? Rav Tuvcha, exactly as the one who serves HaKadosh Baruch Hu Matech Ava. The only thing is not on the surface. is b'derech makif, meaning it's an encompassing kayach, something that I could periodically tap into. So it's birayecho lirayecho. It's there for you as a reservoir that you could periodically, at the time which you need that arousal, to tap into that Rav Tovcha Yer Avodas Hashem, to extract that energy in order to incorporate it, in order to actualize it at the moment which it needs to be implemented. So the ultimate point of anything which is in a concealed manner by every neshama, it's not invested in his body, in his mind and heart. It hovers, meaning to say it's an encompassing force. And from there, and again, as a reservoir, that it would shine to his mind, to his heart, to the time which is the calling is for that arousal to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu with that avo, with that chesed, with that type, or that rav tuvcha, even beyond the regular type. There's a calling for that at that time. Li'iti matzrichim, for necessary times for this arousal, that it should be aroused and it should shine into his mind and into his heart, that it would come into actuality, into action, and mapel mamish, which means into mamish, in actuality mamish, which means it wouldn't only stay something which would just connect to his mind and heart. And of course, yes, mind is more abstract than heart. Heart is more abstract than action. In other words, in comparison to thought, to speech, to action. So he says this arousal, and again, which is another proof how much fully dosaged this Rav Tuvcha is, that it could just not only come into mind and heart and stay aloof. No, it would rush down to thought, to speech, even all the way down, or which he focuses on the lowest kayach, the lowest level, into maisa, into action, and into actuality, and mamash into actuality. And you look at that yid, when he's aroused with that, he's able to extract from that reservoir of the Rav Tuvcha. And you look how he's conducting himself at those moments, you can see that he's exactly the same. The image, the whole appearance of his Avodas Hashem is exactly the same, and it truly is like the one who serves HaKadosh Baruch Hu B'Tev Chesed. You see his spashtus and stoko and gemilas chasodim, is spending for mitzvahs, and hidur mitzvah spashtus limadatayra ad blidai, for the moments again which necessitates the siseirus. So it comes into his mind, into his heart, and is actualized b'peil mamash. So this is what Al Rebbe says. It's exactly the same. Bein ateva, in the previous words, the morav tuvcha, this bleak vulumido, tzafat l'recha, is equally to the palto l'chesim bach, to those who predominantly, overtly serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'techava. Exactly the same dosage. The only thing is, this is who they are by default, and the other ones have it as a reservoir. Right after the brackets, it continues al-kain. And therefore, in here, we have to say this introduction again. And the Alter Rebbe brings home one of the greatest brachas the Alter Rebbe has presented in the entire Sefer Tanya, including Yigeres HaKedesh, which has so many brachas. Read many of it, actually, even the ones that we learned, Yud Beis, and Yud, Gimel famously. But this is something that comes up very strong, and we explain why is this come out strong? The Ashkacha Prat is the way this is printed, because you see in other versions of this, Yigeres HaKedesh Gimel, Al Rebbe brings home this message with the same message of the previous chapters, that a Yid is demanded from a Yid not only to, you don't have to exclude mediocrely serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's not talking about mediocrely serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not the Eved Hashem. Eved Hashem would serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu 100%, but yet still with the rules and parameters. Even of Teiras Emes, if it's his learning Torah, or if he's giving tzedakah, but then there's another idea that Alter Rebbe mentions in Yigeres HaKedesh, in Yigeres HaTshuva, famously in the other Perek Gimel, and in Yud in Yigeres HaKedesh, He has it later in Kutra Sach. Even in tzedakah, there's 20%. The choicest way in the midst of tzedakah, the choicey way of executing the mitzvah of tzedakah is 20%. Nonetheless, there's a limitation over here. The Alter Rebbe says there's another dimension of tzedakah, that he would give away everything. Everything is everything. 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 100%. 100%. The halacha says that the choicest way to give tzedakah is 20%. Yeah, that's from the perspective of mitzvah tzedakah, but there's the idea of tikkun nefesh. He's spashless in tzedakah, and then Alter Rebbe has other places. He's spashless in Talmud Torah, which he has it over here. Tzedakah, much more again in these chapters in the Igeres HaKodesh, as we mentioned before. Definitely, this is a thread throughout all the Igeres HaKodesh. And there's a version over here, there's a nusach that the Alter Rebbe concludes the same idea, and basically saying that you have that bli gvul, that tuvcha, the rav tuvcha, you ought to execute it. You have to find it within yourself. Even the one who serves HaKadosh Baruch Hu with Yireh Shamayim associated with Gvura, because you have that Marav Tuvcha, therefore bring it home in actuality in Ma'aseh B'Peil as much as you can, even though it's not your default Avodah. And that's the way that chapter it concludes. But if you notice Bashgacha Pratis, by divine providence, that version did not come into the Sefer Tanya Kadisha in that manner. I'm not sure why. I believe there's some history behind it. I'm not sure why, but the Alter Rebbe concludes this chapter with brachas and brachas ad bli dai. Unprecedented type of brachas. If you look at the terminology over here, and you look at the famous message, which comes across in Zayar, Kabbalah, in Teres Achsidus, explaining there's a chesed called Rav Chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ein Keneg de Midas Hadin, unlike the Midas in Atzilus, even though the Midas in Atzilus, as we explained many times, the Eilam Atzilus, the Eilam, we just mentioned as well, houses the absoluteness of the Ein Sof, and therefore every Midah has a certain bli gvul to it. But yet Chesed has its counterpart, or its countering Midah, Gvura. What does that mean in what does it mean to the Yid or to the Hashpah Olam when Chesed wants to give the Yid individually or collectively, Am Yisrael, this dosage of Chesed? And again, there's certain bli gvul, because you're talking about the Midas of Atzilus, Le'igur Chara, it has an Ein Sof energy to it, comes Midas HaGvura and says, maybe not. Don't give so much. Do you see how this person conducts himself in this area? In that area, he's not deserving so much Chesed. There's always a countering calling from Gvura to Chesed, Chesed Gvura as well. When Chas v'Shalom, there's an expression Gvura, Chesed would come and try. In other words, these midas are countering one each other, but namely, when it comes to the message, in the message over here, Chesed has its midah of din. Yet there's a Chesed called Rav Chesed, which is known to be the pure Ein Sof Chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the famous Lashon, less small b'hayatika. There's no countering Gvura over that Chesed. And what it means in the practical hashpah of this Chesed, there's nothing stopping it. There's nothing countering it. There's no energy which is arguing on if to give and not to give. And more importantly, it's coming from the pure, unadulterated Ein Sof of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So when that window opens up, this Rav Chesed, there is no end. It's really ad bli dai. The hashpah of bracha is to know without any akbala, without any limitation. How would it manifest in Elam Hazard with unimaginable brachas in every single area of life? In children, in health, in parnasa, ad bli dai. There's the famous expression, revicha, in abundance, of a kulam revicha. And not only in abundance, but like it says, the pasuk says, "Varikaisi lachem bracha ad bli dai." Like the Gemara goes on, "Ad sheyivlu sifsesechem leimer dai." It would be so overwhelming. That's the bracha of Rav Chesed. So on the onset, it has the Ein Sof, the energy of the true, meaning to say the purity of the unadulterated purity of the Ein Sof of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because it's beyond Eilam, it's the Rav Chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Together with that, it doesn't have any midas hadin to counter that midas hachesed. And this is the way the Alter Rebbe concludes the whole page. Give every yid this from Rav Chesed. Open up that fountain of Chesed. It's beyond fountain. A fountain, you could say there's a limitation. Open up that pour of Chesed to every single yid. And that's the way the Alter Rebbe concludes the chapter, with one big bracha. There's a Rav Tuv, they said the Rebbe has a whole word, that Rav Tuv also comes from a very high darga, a very high level. And the bracha connected to the information which we're learning, basically, the Alter Rebbe is concluding that if every single year has Marav Tuvcha, which means not only those Paltal Chesim Bach, not only those Yidim which are connected to Chesed, they have the Tuvcha and more so the Rav Tuvcha. And they're able to serve a Kodesh Baruch Hu, and again, Ad Blidai, the Lashon of the Alter Rebbe before. Again, if you see it, we just mentioned, if you see the previous classes, in Talmud Torah, Ad Blidai. Shar mitzvahs ad blidai, tzedakah ad blidai. Everything is bespashtus with expansiveness and elaboration because they are connected to Chesed, to the Rav Tuv of Chesed. And Alter Rebbe says that's not only limited to them, but even B'riyecha has also Rav Tuv, but not also they have exactly the same dosage of Chesed, the Rav Tuv Chesed, just like the Pa'al Telechesim Bach, those who serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu Metech Avo, that connected with Hashem's Chesed. Those who are connected with Gvura, the Yirei Echa, have the exact same dosage. And therefore they're able to, even though it's not as frequent, but they're able to, at any given time, tap into it, to arouse it because it's standing as a reservoir to be tapped into at times that it needs to be aroused. And they also, in other words, they have that same dosage of that ability, with that ability to express that ispashtus and equally spashtus, equal expansiveness to the extent of ad blidai in every area of Torah mitzvahs, exactly to like the ones paltal achesim bach. The only thing it's lireach and abireach, but it's right there. So if we have it, so we turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and say, reciprocate in the same manner. As we know, B'chlal, just to note, we know that Hashem conducts His world, midah keneged midah, measure per measure. This happened in the very beginning of creation. Hashem established this. The notion of reciprocity, and especially by Matan Torah, the way the Yid acts, the way the Yid functions, that's the way there's the function on high. And therefore, the Alter Rebbe concludes, let's see it in the text, okay, and therefore, Sharav Tov L'Beis Yisrael. There's so much good in Am Yisrael collectively and individual by every single year. That's Sofun V'Agoli, this which is hidden, and this is what is manifest, this which is revealed. And it's B'chinas B'li Gvul L'Midah, it's without any measurement, and without any limitation, L'fi Erech Nafsheis Amum L'Beshes B'Guf, in comparison to their nefesh, which is invested in their body. And because it's invested in the body, of the hashpah of the nefesh over the body is a limited hashpah because it invests in the body. And this is beyond that. This is the Rav Tov L'Beis Yisrael. It has a measurement, it has an idea of B'li Gvul L'Midah, without any measurement and without any limitation in comparison to the nefesh which is invested in the body. Alter Rebbe continues and says, L'ka l'chein, therefore, gam atu Hashem, you Hashem, tisnai gimohem b'midas chazdocha godu b'li gvul v'tachlis. Conduct yourself with them with your character of chesed, but not the regular chesed, your grand chesed, your infinite chesed, your limitless chesed, which is called the Rav chesed, which is the chesed known to be higher than Seder Ishtalshalos, literally translated the order of evolution starting from Eilam Atzilus, which, as we mentioned so many times, Atzilus carries the absoluteness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore houses and hosts the absoluteness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore the midas of Atzilus are also believable, but it has a countering midah. Chesed is a countering midah of Gvura, as an example. This is beyond that. This is called the Rab, not the regular Chesed, which again, even the regular Chesed is so grand. But this is beyond that. This is Rav Chesed. As the Alter Rebbe continues, the Is Chesed. We know there is Chesed and there is Chesed. I mean to say there's two types of Chesed. Is Chesed Eilam. There's a Chesed which is called Chesed Eilam, associated with Eilam Atzilus. Even though Eilam Atzilus is less Eilam, it is an Eilam, but it's more a Eilam which the spirit of the Eilam is all about the absoluteness of the Ein Sof. But nonetheless, it's still Eilam, and therefore the Chesed is called Eilam. And because chesed olam, therefore yesh kinegdu l'masa midas hadin. Chas v'shalom. It has this countering midah, which is midas hadin. L'mayit l'tzamtzem chas v'tuvit. After the says chas v'shalom, heaven forbid. Or literally translated, chas means teracham rachmanis, and peace, meaning to say that it should be it's something which is a difficult idea, because what does this midas hadin do? It wants to minimize, diminuate, and to condense Hashem's kindness and goodness. Chesed elyon inikar Rav Chesed, talking about the higher level, the Rav Chesed, the supreme Chesed, ain't connected midas hadin l'mayit l'tzamtzem Rav Chesed. It doesn't have any counterpart. It doesn't have any countering energy. Less smala b'hayatika. This is the pure chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There is no midas hadin to minimize and to condense the grandness of Hashem's kindness, milispashed bli gvul v'tachlis, to be manifest without any limitation and without any border. Ki hu nimshech mechnes seviv kalam. This comes from the area of Seviv Kalam, with the way Hashem transcends Olam, Seviv Kol Almin, the way Hashem has formed himself by himself, as we've mentioned many times, the difference of Memali Kalam, not to get into, we probably had so many times in the studies till now. The first time we had it is in Peri Gimel, in L'Kuti Amorim, the first segment. Alter Rebbe has this, the first time in Tanya, he mentions the Memali Kalam and Seviv Kalam, and we took the time then to explain it, and other times as well. Memala Kalam is the way Hashem fills the world, and therefore this is more associated with a limited or a condensed energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Seviv Kalam, and it surrounds, meaning to say it transcends Eilumis, and therefore it's about the purity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the way Hashem has formed so by himself, beyond getting involved in Eilam. Seviv Kalam, this Rav Chesed is of course coming from the Seviv Kalam. Utmida the Chol Tmidin, the hiding of all hidings. Like we say, Yeshe b'Seiser Elyon. Hashem is even higher than revelation. He is more in his area of steaming, Seiser, because this is the way the Eibishter's, we say, for himself, by himself, higher than expression, higher than getting involved in anything which is associated with the finitude, spirit of finitude. And in this case also, that's the Seviv Kalam. It's hidden from all hidings. It's the core of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the level of Seviv Kalam, the Rav Chesed. There is no midas hadin to counter that Chesed, because it's so deep within HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Tmira dechol Tmirin, which is called Kesed Eli, which is called the supreme crown of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And in the terminology of Kabbalah, in Keser, again, which is higher, known to be higher than Seder Ishtalshus, the order of evolution, which begins with Elam Atzilus. This is the crown, just like the crown goes above the human being, above the system. The system begins in one, the cognitive faculties is the primary expression of the even, you're talking about the human being, it starts with this cognitive, the nerve system, the cognitive faculties, and it ends up into heart, thought, speech, and action, and any other limbs and organs of the body. Keser is which goes over that, not connected to that. It goes over that. So too within HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there's the organism, so to say, the primordial Adam, which is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Kaviyachol, of course, which is the Sfiras that tills, and then there's the Keser, which is so much higher, that's Seviv Kalam, in the way Hashem, it's beyond Seder Hishtalshul, it's beyond Sfiras. And that's where this Midah comes from. As we said, not only, as we mentioned so many times, the Kabbalah and Chassidus, there's the Chitzeinis HaKeser, known to be Arich. This is even deeper, because you say Atik is where we say less small by Atik. There's no left. There's no Gvura in Atik. So this is the purity of Hashem's Chesed, the B'li Gvul of Hashem's Chesed, the Rav Chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Therefore, the Alter Rebbe says, Ata Hashem tisnai gitam. Tisnai imohem, you conduct yourself imohem with every single yid, with your kindness, not only your kindness associated with Elam Atzilus, which also has believed Gvul kindness, but there's that negative aspect that there has that countering Gvura, L'mayit or L'tzamtzim, to minimize the Chesed which wants to be mispashet, wants to extend itself. Not so with the midah of Rav Chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and HaKadosh Rebbe Kaviyachol turns to Hashem here. And he says because every single Yid has that Rav Tuv, every single Rav Tuv Lebeis Yisrael, and the Tzofim V'Agoli, this which is hidden and is revealed, which is B'li Gvul Midah. And therefore you, Hashem, conduct yourself with your great Chesed to every single Yid, and again, Mimahem collectively and individually with every single Yid, in this very way, not only with the regular Chesed, but the Rav Chesed, which has no countering midah gvura, and again, these two advantages, nothing stops it, nothing diminuates, meaning nothing minimizes, there's no minimizing force, or force which would minimize the chesed, and more so because it's coming from Ein Sof. When Ein Sof is mispashet, the brachas in all areas of life is Ein Sof, it's infinite. That's how you see how it fits in so beautifully with the Gemara. Based on the pasuk, but in case of the bracha, ad bli dai, to no end. Where does it come from? It's a limited world. Hashem's brachas should come down ad bli dai. How does Hashem's brachas come down ad bli dai with no end? Yeah, because it's coming from this Rav Chesed, so there is no end, and it comes with a fully spashtus, and it comes with a full bli gvul, because you're talking about the Rav Chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu with these two advantages. No din countering it, and again, it's the Ein Sof type of chesed. You should guard them, you should hide them in the hiding of your face. And finally, the Lashon in Tehillim, Titz B'nei Besukkah, the famous capital in David Hashem, Titz B'nei Besukkah, you should hide them in the sukkah. What does that mean? And what's the connection to the message over here? The answer is so simple. Because when you're talking about this which is begolui, this is which is revealed, this is already not the Eibishter the way Hashem, not Hashem the way He's for Himself by Himself. It's the way He deals with Memalikal, and then it's already the first Eilam, even Eilam Atzilus. Remember, Eilam Atzilus is a pure world. We spoke about it so many times. It represents, it carries the Ein Sof of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Nonetheless, it's still an Eilam. And therefore, that's already the reveal, the way Hashem goes away from Himself, the way He's for Himself by Himself, and extends Himself to something else. And therefore, there's limitation. And in this case, there's the Chesed, has a countering Gvura. But you're talking about the Stirim, hide them, in the hiding of your face, of your core. There, everything is bleakful, everything is infinite. So too, when you say Titzbinim, hide them in your sukkah. What's the sukkah? Sukkah is a hovering kayach. Sukkah, when you want to say between, let's say, these two kaychas, expressions of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which we speak about right here, memale kolalmin or soivev kolalmin, this which surrounds, word means to say transcends Eilam. What would sukkah be would identify with? Of course, the soivev kolalmin. That's what sukkah is all about. The sukkah is a makif. It surrounds. Similar to Seiv Kalamid, it's not a matter of getting involved in. It's not about getting involved. It's about staying aloof. It's the way Hashem expresses Himself. It's the expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The way HaKadosh Baruch Hu is for Himself, and that's where David HaMelech says Titz B'nei, not in a place where there is beginning of revelation, connection, and therefore there could be the countering of the midah of Gvura, or any other idea which is associated with finiteness, because it's already coming out, getting involved. No, in the sukkah, similar to Seviv Kalamid, the way it's transcendent of getting involved, and that's the Eid of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there the Yid should be placed, and there the Yid should be connected to. Titz B'nei B'sukkah, V'gaymer, which is the conclusion, the following words of that pasuk, which is all about brachas, as we know that famous capital in Tehillim. And this is the end of the chapter. Alter Rebbe benching, asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu, no ifs. This is who the Yid is. If it's overt, or covert, this is who your nation is. And therefore, Alter Rebbe turns to Hashem and he says, Ato Hashem. This is so poignant over here. This is so powerful over here. The Alter Rebbe talks, Gam Ato Hashem. He's saying, you Hashem, Tisnai, because of This is the DNA of every single Yid. This is the makeup of every single Yid. Every single Yid, without exception. Therefore, Ata Shem Tisnahegi Mohem, with your Chazdecha HaGodel, Believable V'Tachlis, with this Rav Chesed, shall Hashem help, that we should see all the brachas B'Tei V'Nira V'Nigla in apparent and revealed good. Of course, if it's coming from the Rav Chesed, it ought to be revealed. It ought to be tangible, palpable brachas, and again, it should be not tangible or palpable, but we should truly sense the ad bli dai, the infinity of these brachas, and they should manifest in every single area of life. And again, of course, they manifest in every area of life without limitation, because you're talking about the Rav, the bli gvul of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shall we see it? Gesundheit and Freilichkeit in all areas, Bonachai, Mazene Revicha, individually, collectively, Imahem, all of Am Yisrael, without any exception. And in the bigger picture, this is where the energy of the Gula Amitis Vashlema comes, that infinite Rav Chesed manifest down here in this world, V'ro kol basar yachdav, as the Pasuk says in Yeshaya, that even the flesh is able to see it, Ayin bi'ayin yiru, the eyes are able to see this great revelation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and again, more so, beyond the ayin, which is usually we look and see with our eyes, the pasuk goes on and says with precision, even the basar, the flesh, feels that great important energy. May it be bimheira v'yameinu. Amen. Have a wonderful evening.